My alpha lost his memory. I raised our son alone until he came back. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic, emotional, and unforgettable boy love stories like this. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind has forgotten. Adrian Whitmore could remember the names of every executive sitting around the polished conference table. He could remember every contract his company had signed during the past 5 years, every investment that had built one of the largest business empires in the country, and every speech that had earned him the admiration of people who believed he had the perfect life. Yet every morning, when he looked into the mirror, an unexplainable emptiness stared back at him. His doctors called it permanent memory loss caused by an accident years earlier. His friends insisted he had already recovered because he had rebuilt a successful future. Adrian smiled politely whenever they said those words, but success had never answered the question that quietly followed him through every season. Why did his heart always feel as though someone important was still waiting for him? Across the city, Elliot Hayes had already been awake for 2 hours. The small neighborhood bakery he owned filled with the comforting scent of fresh bread, cinnamon rolls, and warm coffee long before sunrise. Every loaf he placed into the display case represented another ordinary day, another chance to provide a peaceful life for the little boy who happily arranged colorful cookies inside the front window. Liam Hayes was 6 years old, endlessly curious, and convinced that every stranger had a story worth hearing. He often asked about his father, and Elliot always answered with gentle honesty. "Your dad was the kindest alpha I have ever known." Liam would smile, accept the answer, and continue drawing pictures of a tall man whose face existed only in his imagination. Elliot never lied to his son. He simply left out the part that hurt too. Much to explain. Adrian had not abandoned them. Adrian had forgotten them. On most mornings, Elliot believed he had finally accepted that painful truth. Then there were mornings when an unfamiliar luxury sedan stopped outside the bakery during rush hour, and for reasons he could never explain, his heartbeat became impossible to ignore. It happened again on a cool autumn morning. Adrian stepped out of the black car after an unexpected detour caused by heavy traffic. His assistant suggested grabbing coffee from the small bakery while they waited for the roads to clear. Adrian agreed without thinking. The tiny shop felt strangely familiar the moment he opened the door. The warm scent of fresh bread wrapped around him like a forgotten memory, filling him with an overwhelming sense of comfort he could not explain. His eyes wandered across the cozy room until they stopped on a collection of framed drawings hanging beside the register. Every picture showed the same smiling alpha standing beside a cheerful Omega and a laughing little boy beneath a bright blue sky. Adrian felt an unexpected ache inside his chest. Before he could understand why, Liam came running across the bakery carrying a tray of napkins almost as big as himself. He accidentally bumped into Adrian, causing several napkins to flutter gently onto the wooden floor. "I am sorry, mister," Liam said quickly before looking up with wide silver blue eyes. The little boy studied Adrian's face for several long seconds before smiling with innocent certainty. "You smile exactly like the dad in my drawings." The words were simple. The effect was anything but. Somewhere deep inside Adrian's silent heart, a forgotten memory knocked gently against a door that had remained closed for 6 long years. Adrian stood frozen for several seconds after Liam's innocent words, unable to explain why they echoed so deeply inside him. His assistant quietly reminded him that the board meeting would begin in less than 30 minutes, but Adrian barely seemed to hear. He looked once more at the smiling child before offering a warm smile of his own. "You must be a wonderful artist," he said gently. Liam beamed with pride. "My dad is. In all my drawings because Mom says love does not disappear just because someone is far away." Elliot nearly dropped the tray he had been carrying. For a brief moment, the entire bakery became painfully quiet. Adrian turned toward the voice behind the counter and found himself looking directly into Elliot's calm green eyes. Neither of them spoke. Elliot recognized Adrian immediately, although the confident alpha standing before him carried no sign of recognition. The years had changed his hairstyle, his clothing, and the quiet maturity resting in his expression, but the kindness in his eyes remained exactly the same. Adrian felt an unexpected pull toward the Omega, a strange sense of familiarity that made absolutely no sense. He had never met this man before, or at least that was what every memory inside his mind insisted. "Have we met somewhere?" Adrian asked politely. Elliot forced a small smile. "I do not think so, sir." It was the safest answer he could give. Telling the truth would only reopen a wound that had taken 6 years to survive. Adrian accepted the answer with a slight nod, yet the uneasy feeling refused to disappear. As Elliot prepared Adrian's coffee, he instinctively reached for a small glass jar filled with honey instead of sugar. Halfway through the motion, he suddenly stopped. Years ago, Adrian had always preferred a spoonful of honey because he claimed it made coffee taste warmer on cold mornings. Elliot quietly placed the jar back on the shelf and finished preparing a plain black coffee instead. Before he could hand over the cup, Liam spoke again. "Mom always says honey makes coffee taste happier." Adrian stared at the little boy in surprise. Without understanding why, he heard himself replying, "I used to believe that too." The words escaped before he could think. Elliot slowly looked up, his heartbeat quickening. Adrian frowned, equally confused by his own response. "I do not know why I said that," he admitted. "It just felt familiar." An uncomfortable silence settled between them until Adrian's assistant stepped forward with an apologetic smile. "Mr. Whitmore, we really need to leave." Adrian accepted the coffee but hesitated before walking away. His eyes drifted once more toward the collection of children's drawings displayed on the bakery wall. In every picture, the smiling Alpha held the same little boy while standing beside an Omega beneath a wide blue sky. One drawing caught his attention more than the others. The Alpha wore a simple silver bracelet around his wrist. Adrian instinctively glanced at his own left wrist, where an old faded mark circled the skin as though he had once worn something there for many years. He gently rubbed the faint outline with his thumb, unable to explain the sudden ache inside his chest. As he stepped outside, he looked back through the bakery window. Elliot was quietly watching him leave while Liam happily waved with both hands. Adrian raised his hand in return before entering the waiting car. During the drive downtown, he remained unusually silent. The scent of fresh bread still lingered in his thoughts. The little boy's smile refused to leave his mind, and one impossible question repeated itself over and over. If they were truly strangers, then why did leaving them behind feel so much like saying goodbye all over again? Adrian tried to focus on the presentation projected across the conference room wall, but every chart, every financial report, and every strategic discussion faded behind the memory of a little boy with bright silver blue eyes. For the first time since his accident, he found himself distracted by something that had nothing to do with business. When the meeting finally ended, his executive team celebrated another successful quarter, yet Adrian remained unusually quiet. As he gathered his documents, his closest friend and chief operating officer, Daniel Foster, noticed the change immediately. "You have looked somewhere else all afternoon," Daniel said with a knowing smile. Adrian hesitated before answering. "I stopped at a small bakery this morning because traffic forced us to change our route." Daniel laughed softly. "And somehow a bakery has you thinking harder than a billion-dollar merger?" Adrian looked toward the city skyline beyond the office windows. "I met people who felt strangely familiar. I cannot explain it. It was as though I had stepped into a memory that belonged to someone else." Daniel's expression became more serious. Since the accident 6 years earlier, Adrian had occasionally experienced brief emotional reactions that no doctor could fully explain. Certain songs, scents, and places created powerful feelings despite leaving no clear memories behind. Every specialist had offered the same conclusion. The emotional part of memory sometimes survived even when the details disappeared. "Perhaps you should visit again," Daniel suggested. "Not because you expect answers, but because avoiding the feeling will not make it disappear." Meanwhile, across town, Elliot finished serving the last afternoon customers before locking the bakery doors. Liam sat at a small wooden table completing homework while quietly humming the same lullaby Elliot had sung every evening since he was a baby. The melody filled the peaceful room, and Elliot suddenly found himself remembering another autumn afternoon years ago. Adrian had been standing beside the kitchen counter with flour on his sleeves after insisting he wanted to learn how to bake fresh bread. The loaf they produced had been uneven and slightly burned, but Adrian had laughed harder than Elliot had ever seen. Even if I forget every recipe, Adrian had joked that day. I hope I never forget moments like this. Elliot gently closed his eyes, pushing the memory away before it became too painful. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Mom. Liam looked up from his notebook. The man from this morning seemed nice. Elliot smiled gently. He did. Liam tilted his head with innocent curiosity. Do you think Dad would like him? Elliot's heart tightened. I think your dad would be grateful that kind people still exist. Liam accepted the answer for the moment. But before returning to his homework, he quietly picked up one of his colored pencils and began another drawing. This time, instead of 3 people standing apart beneath a blue sky, he drew the smiling Alpha closer to the Omega and himself. Later that evening, Adrian found himself unable to ignore the restless feeling inside his heart. Without telling anyone, he instructed his driver to return to the neighborhood where the small bakery stood. The streets were already growing quiet as the sun disappeared beyond the rooftops. The bakery lights were off, but through the large front window, Adrian noticed a single drawing taped beside the entrance. It showed a little boy holding the hands of 2 adults beneath a handwritten sentence that read, "Families always find their way back to each other." Adrian stood motionless on the sidewalk as an unexpected tear formed in the corner of his eye. He quickly wiped it away, unable to understand why a child's simple drawing felt more familiar than his entire forgotten past. The following Saturday arrived with clear skies and the first cool breeze of autumn. Elliot unlocked the bakery before sunrise, believing it would be another ordinary morning, but his heart refused to settle. Ever since Adrian had walked through the front door several days earlier, memories that Elliot had carefully tucked away kept returning without permission. 6 years ago, their life had been simple. Adrian had never cared about expensive restaurants or grand celebrations. He always claimed that the happiest moments could be found inside their little kitchen, where fresh bread cooled beside the window while soft music played in the background. They had dreamed about raising a family built on kindness instead of perfection. Then the accident had changed everything. Adrian survived, but every memory connected to Elliot and their unborn child disappeared. The doctors had spoken with gentle honesty. There was no guarantee those memories would ever return. Elliot had spent months visiting the hospital, hoping that one familiar smile or one shared story might awaken something inside Adrian's heart. It never happened. Eventually, Adrian's relatives encouraged him to begin a completely new life so he would not remain trapped by a past he could no longer remember. Elliot made the hardest decision of his life. Rather than asking Adrian to carry the weight of a family he could not recall, he quietly stepped away and built a peaceful future for the child they both deserved to love. Liam grew up surrounded by warmth instead of resentment because Elliot refused to let grief become the foundation of their home. As the bakery welcomed its first customers that morning, the bell above the entrance chimed once again. Elliot looked up instinctively and froze. Adrian stood in the doorway wearing simple casual clothes instead of an expensive business suit, holding a small paper bag from a nearby bookstore. There was no assistant, no driver, and no rushed schedule waiting outside. Adrian smiled with quiet uncertainty. "I hope I am not interrupting," he said. Elliot managed a calm smile despite the emotions rushing through him. Not at all. Before either of them could continue, Liam hurried from the kitchen carrying a tray of warm muffins. His face immediately brightened. "You came back," he exclaimed with genuine excitement. Adrian laughed softly. "I promised myself I would." He handed the paper bag to Liam. Inside was a beautifully illustrated children's book about a little bird searching for its family across changing seasons. Liam hugged the book against his chest with grateful excitement. "Thank you, Mr. Adrian." Hearing the child naturally speak his name sent an unexpected warmth through Adrian's heart. Elliot watched the simple exchange in silence, noticing how naturally Adrian knelt to Liam's eye level while asking about school, favorite stories, and the newest drawings hanging inside the bakery. Nothing about the interaction felt forced. It felt instinctive, as though some forgotten part of Adrian still knew exactly how to speak with the child standing before him. While Liam eagerly described the adventures inside his favorite picture books, Adrian noticed a framed photograph resting on a shelf near the register. The picture showed Elliot holding a newborn wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Around Elliot's wrist rested a simple woven bracelet braided from navy and white thread. Adrian's breathing caught unexpectedly. Without understanding why, he instinctively touched his own wrist again, where the faint mark from a long-lost bracelet remained. A sudden image flashed across his mind. Two hands laughing together while weaving matching bracelets beneath the shade of a large maple tree. The vision vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, leaving only one whispered sentence echoing inside his thoughts. "Promise me we will always find our way back home." Adrian remained unusually quiet after leaving the bakery, replaying the fleeting memory that had appeared when he saw the woven bracelet in the photograph. It had lasted only a few seconds, yet it felt more vivid than anything he had experienced since the accident. Instead of driving back to the office, he asked his driver to take him to the rehabilitation center where he had completed years of recovery. The familiar building overlooked a peaceful lake, and several of the doctors still remembered him. His neurologist, Dr. Evelyn Brooks, welcomed him with a warm smile before listening carefully as Adrian described the emotions, the bakery, the child, and the sudden memory that had surfaced. She remained thoughtful for a long moment before speaking. "Memory does not always return in a straight line," she explained gently. "Sometimes the heart recognizes people before the mind can explain why. Familiar places, scents, voices, and routines can awaken emotional memories long before factual memories return." Adrian lowered his eyes thoughtfully. "What if those memories belong to someone I have already hurt without realizing it?" Dr. Brooks answered with quiet honesty. "Then the most important thing is not how quickly you remember. It is how you choose to treat them today." Those words stayed with Adrian long after he left the clinic. Meanwhile, back at the bakery, Liam spent the afternoon reading the illustrated book Adrian had given him. Every few minutes he ran excitedly toward Elliot to share another page, laughing whenever the little bird discovered a new clue leading home. After closing the bakery for the evening, Elliot noticed Liam carefully placing the book beside his bed instead of on the bookshelf. "It is my favorite now," Liam whispered happily, "because Mr. Adrian picked it for me." Elliot smiled, although his heart felt heavier than before. Watching Adrian naturally care for Liam filled him with both gratitude and quiet sorrow. For years he had convinced himself that keeping their distance protected everyone involved, yet every passing day made that decision harder to defend. 2 evenings later, Adrian returned once again, this time carrying a small wooden birdhouse that had been painted white with soft blue trim. "I remembered seeing sparrows outside your bakery," he said with an embarrassed smile. "I thought Liam might enjoy hanging this in the little tree beside the front window." Liam's eyes lit up immediately. Together they carried the birdhouse outside while Elliot watched from the doorway. Adrian patiently showed Liam how to secure it safely without damaging the tree, encouraging him to leave a handful of birdseed nearby for future visitors. The simple moment felt so natural that Elliot briefly forgot the painful years separating them. As the three of them stood beneath the quiet evening sky, a tiny sparrow landed on the branch above the new birdhouse before singing a cheerful melody. Liam laughed with delight. "Look, Mr. Adrian. It already found its new home." Adrian smiled warmly at the little bird before unexpectedly saying, "Sometimes home is waiting long before we realize we have been searching for it." The sentence left his lips so naturally that even he looked surprised. Elliot's breathing caught. Adrian had spoken those exact words years ago while they were building a nursery together before Liam was born. He had completely forgotten the memory, yet somehow the feeling behind it had survived. Elliot quietly looked away before tears could reach his eyes. At that same moment, Liam slipped his small hand into Adrian's without thinking. Adrian instinctively held it with gentle care, and neither of them realized that for the very first time in 6 years, father and son were standing together exactly as they had always been meant to. Several days passed, and Adrian found himself creating reasons to visit the neighborhood more often. Sometimes he arrived with fresh fruit for the bakery because he had noticed Liam loved apples. Other times he stopped by with a new storybook or simply ordered coffee before quietly sitting near the window while answering emails. Neither Adrian nor Elliot spoke about the growing familiarity between them, yet it became impossible to ignore. Customers gradually assumed Adrian was an old family friend, and Liam accepted that explanation without question because, in his heart, it already felt true. One crisp Saturday morning, the local elementary school hosted a small community fair where families could enjoy games, music, and handmade crafts. Elliot volunteered to run the bakery's booth, while Liam eagerly participated in the children's art competition. As the event filled with laughter and cheerful conversations, Adrian unexpectedly appeared carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I thought you both might need a break," he said with an easy smile. Elliot thanked him quietly, still surprised by how naturally Adrian had become part of their routine. While the adults prepared baked goods for visitors, Liam disappeared toward the drawing tables with a box of colored pencils. An hour later, the judges invited every child to display their artwork across a long wooden fence surrounding the playground. Parents gathered nearby, smiling proudly as the colorful pictures fluttered in the gentle autumn breeze. Adrian walked beside Elliot until they reached Liam's drawing. The picture immediately caught his attention. It showed the same 3 people that had appeared in earlier drawings, but this time the smiling alpha held the hand of both the Omega and the little boy while standing beneath a large maple tree. Above them, Liam had carefully written one simple sentence in bright blue letters. "My family will find each other." Adrian felt the world around him grow strangely quiet. He stared at the drawing much longer than anyone else, unable to explain the overwhelming emotion filling his chest. Without warning, another memory surfaced. He saw himself kneeling beside a tiny crib that had not yet been assembled, laughing as someone teased him for reading the instruction manual upside down. Warm sunlight poured through an apartment window while a gentle voice nearby whispered, "Our son is going to love this room." Adrian instinctively reached toward his temple as the memory faded almost immediately, leaving only a deep ache behind. Elliot noticed the sudden change and stepped closer with quiet concern. "Are you all right?" Adrian nodded slowly, although his voice carried unmistakable uncertainty. "I remembered a child's room. I do not know whose it was, but it felt important." Elliot lowered his eyes, struggling to steady his breathing. Liam came running toward them just then, proudly holding the blue ribbon awarded to his drawing. "Look what I won," he exclaimed happily. Adrian smiled with genuine pride before kneeling to Liam's height. "You earned it." Liam wrapped his arms around Adrian in a spontaneous hug that lasted only a few seconds, yet something inside Adrian's heart shifted forever. The embrace felt impossibly familiar, as though his arms had waited years to remember exactly how to protect the little boy standing before him. As Liam hurried away to show his ribbon to friends, Adrian remained kneeling for a moment longer before quietly asking Elliot the question that had been growing inside him since the day they first met. "Please tell me honestly, have we truly never known each other before? Or is there something about my past that everyone believes I am not ready to hear?" The question lingered between them long after the sounds of the community fair drifted into the distance. Elliot looked toward Liam, who was laughing with other children near the playground, before turning back to Adrian with quiet eyes filled with years of carefully hidden emotions. "There are things about your past that only you deserve to remember," Elliot answered gently. "I never wanted to replace your memories with my words." Adrian searched Elliot's face, sensing that every sentence carried far more meaning than it revealed. "But you know something," he said softly. Elliot nodded. "Yes." Before Adrian could ask another question, Liam came running back with a bright smile, proudly holding the blue ribbon against his chest. "Can we all get ice cream before we go home?" he asked hopefully. Adrian and Elliot exchanged a brief glance before smiling at the same time. "I think we can do that," Elliot replied. They walked together to a small ice cream stand near the park entrance, and for the next hour the conversation stayed light. Liam talked excitedly about school, books, birds, and the bakery. Adrian listened with genuine interest, laughing at the little boy's endless curiosity. Every answer Liam gave somehow felt familiar, as though pieces of Adrian's own personality had quietly found their way into the child without either of them realizing it. While Liam finished the last bite of his vanilla cone, an elderly woman approached the table carrying a shopping bag filled with fresh flowers. She stopped suddenly after noticing Adrian. Her expression shifted from surprise to disbelief. "Adrian," she whispered. Adrian stood politely. "I am sorry. Have we met?" The woman looked from Adrian to Elliot before understanding immediately that something was terribly different. She offered a gentle smile instead of asking difficult questions. "Years ago, you helped my husband repair the benches outside the neighborhood library," she said warmly. "You and your family came every Saturday morning." Adrian frowned slightly. "My family." The woman nodded without hesitation. You always said there was nothing more important. Elliot lowered his eyes, unable to interrupt. Before Adrian could continue, the woman looked at Liam with obvious affection. You have grown so much. Liam smiled politely, even though he did not recognize her. The elderly woman quietly excused herself after wishing them a pleasant afternoon, leaving Adrian standing in thoughtful silence. As they walked back toward the bakery, Adrian finally spoke again. She remembered something that I could not. Elliot answered gently. Many people do. Adrian stopped beneath a row of maple trees whose golden leaves drifted softly through the cool afternoon air. Then please tell me one thing, he said. Was I a good man before I lost my memory? Elliot did not hesitate. You were never perfect, he replied with a faint smile. But you always tried to become better than the person you had been yesterday. That was the reason people trusted you. Adrian looked down for a long moment before quietly saying, if I truly left behind people who mattered that much, then I want to find them, even if my memories never return. Elliot felt tears gathering despite every effort to remain composed. He had spent 6 years believing those words would never be spoken again. As Liam skipped ahead toward the bakery carrying his ribbon and favorite storybook, neither Adrian nor Elliot noticed the small family photograph that had slipped unnoticed from Liam's backpack onto the quiet sidewalk behind them, waiting for someone else to discover the truth that had been patiently following them all along. The following morning began with an unexpected knock on the bakery door before sunrise. Elliot opened it to find the elderly woman from the community fair standing quietly with a familiar photograph in her hands. I believe this belongs to your son, she said with a gentle smile. Elliot immediately recognized the picture that had slipped from Liam's backpack the previous afternoon. It showed Adrian, Elliot, and a newborn Liam sitting together beneath a maple tree only weeks after Liam's birth. Before handing it back, the woman hesitated. Someone else saw this before I picked it up. Elliot's heartbeat quickened. Who? Adrian. The single answer left the room completely silent. According to the woman, Adrian had bent down to retrieve the photograph after noticing it on the sidewalk. He had stared at it for several long moments without speaking. Although he had not recognized the faces with certainty, something about the image had shaken him deeply. Instead of keeping it, he had quietly asked the nearest volunteer whether they knew the family before continuing his walk alone. Elliot thanked the woman sincerely, closed the bakery door, and sat in silence while holding the photograph against his chest. Across the city, Adrian had canceled every meeting on his schedule. The photograph refused to leave his thoughts. He had seen himself standing beside Elliot, smiling with a happiness that no business achievement had ever given him. The little baby wrapped in a pale blue blanket had looked strangely familiar even before Adrian learned the child's name. He opened a locked drawer inside his apartment and removed a small collection of personal belongings recovered after the accident. Among them rested an old silver keychain engraved with 3 tiny birds flying, together beneath a single line that had always puzzled him. Home is where we choose each other. As his fingers traced the familiar words, another memory surfaced with unexpected clarity. He remembered laughing while Elliot insisted the engraving sounded too sentimental. Adrian had answered, then it is perfect because it will remind me every day what matters most. The memory disappeared almost immediately, but this time it left something behind. It left certainty. Adrian drove directly to the bakery without calling ahead. When he stepped inside, Elliot looked up from the counter, already sensing that something had changed. Adrian slowly placed the silver keychain beside the family photograph. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Adrian looked into Elliot's eyes with quiet honesty. I still cannot remember every detail, he admitted. I cannot tell you what we ate on our first date or the exact day we met. But I remember how you made me feel. I remember choosing a future with you. And somehow, even after losing everything else, my heart never stopped looking for both of you. Elliot's eyes filled with tears he had held back for 6 long years. Before he could answer, Liam ran out from the kitchen carrying another drawing he had finished that morning. This one showed the 3 of them standing together again, but this time there was no empty space between the Alpha and the Omega. Liam smiled proudly before placing the picture beside the old family photograph. See, he said with complete confidence. I told you families always find their way back to each other. Adrian looked at the child, then at Elliot, and understood that whether every memory returned or not, The life waiting in front of him was no longer part of the past. It was the future he wanted to choose again every single day. 6 months later, the little bakery on the corner had become more than a neighborhood favorite. It had become a place where people gathered not only for fresh bread and warm coffee, but for quiet conversations, shared laughter, and the simple reminder that every family carried a story worth honoring. Adrian still visited every morning before work, not because he remembered every detail of the life he had lost, but because he wanted to build new memories beside the people who had never stopped believing in him. Some mornings, another forgotten moment returned without warning. A familiar song playing through the speakers would remind him of dancing with Elliot while fresh bread cooled on the counter. The smell of cinnamon would bring back a rainy afternoon spent planning Liam's nursery. A glimpse of autumn leaves would remind him of promises made beneath the maple tree. Other days, nothing returned at all. Surprisingly, those quiet days no longer frightened him. He had finally learned that memories were gifts, not requirements. Love was proven through the choices made in the present. One Saturday afternoon, Liam invited both Adrian and Elliot to his elementary school's Family Day celebration. Children proudly introduced their parents while teachers welcomed everyone into classrooms filled with colorful artwork and handwritten dreams for the future. When Liam's teacher asked each student to describe what family meant, the little boy stood confidently before the class and smiled. "Family is the people who keep choosing each other," he said. "Sometimes it takes a little longer, but love always finds the way." Adrian felt his eyes fill with emotion. Elliot gently reached for his hand beneath the classroom table, and this time Adrian held it without hesitation. After the celebration, they walked together through the nearby park where golden leaves drifted slowly across the quiet paths. Liam ran ahead, laughing as he chased a flock of small birds into the open field. Adrian watched his son with peaceful gratitude before turning toward Elliot. "There is something I need to tell you," he said softly. Elliot smiled with patient warmth. "I know." Adrian shook his head gently. "No, you deserve to hear it anyway. I spent years believing I had lost my past forever. Then I realized something far more important. You never asked me to become the man I used to be. You only asked me to become the man standing beside you today." Elliot's eyes shimmered beneath the afternoon sunlight. "Because that is the man Liam and I have come to know." Again, Adrian smiled, feeling a quiet peace settle inside him at last. A few weeks later, Adrian announced the creation of the Whitmore Family Foundation, a community program dedicated to supporting parents rebuilding their lives after unexpected hardships. Instead of focusing on what had been lost, the foundation helped families create new beginnings through education, childcare, counseling, and neighborhood partnerships. Elliot expanded the bakery into a community cafe where local children could read books after school, while volunteers organized storytelling afternoons and family workshops. Liam proudly helped every weekend, greeting visitors with the same bright smile that had unknowingly led his father home. Years passed, and although Adrian never recovered every missing memory, he stopped measuring his happiness by what had disappeared. Every morning he still shared coffee with Elliot before opening the bakery. Every afternoon he listened to Liam excitedly describe another adventure from school, and every evening they returned home together beneath the same sky that had watched over them through every season of waiting. Looking back, Adrian finally understood the lesson life had quietly been teaching him all along. Memory can fade without warning. Time can separate even the closest hearts, and plans can change in ways no one expects. But kindness endures, forgiveness creates room for hope, and the family we continue choosing every single day becomes stronger than anything that was ever forgotten.